the library after college, didn't know that that was actually going to be my path. But I started, said I'm looking for a strong community programming. That was my niche. And never did I ever know that my passion for doing programming and all of the amazing things that I did at the library would foster the work that I'm doing now in the field of media literacy. So I'm just always feeling amongst family anytime I'm around the presence of other librarians. And so today I am presenting on how to civically engage youth through media literacy education. All of the work that I have done in the field has centered youth, specifically adolescents. And I am just really excited to share some of the things that I have actually attributed to the field, some of the things I've been working on in the field, and some of the successes that I've had and strategies that you can use and implement. All right, so just an overview. Once again, my name is Jamika Anderson. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. My research is in critical digital media literacies. I have been doing work in this field for over 10 years. I started a nonprofit called I Am Not the Media Incorporated that focuses on teaching teens media literacy and media creation. I also serve as a project manager for the National Association of Media Literacy Education and New America. And I have served as an advisor with the American Library Association for the Media Literacy in Libraries project that they just launched about a year ago. And lastly, I've also been doing some work in the policy space with lobbying for media literacy through a national organization called Media Literacy Now, where I serve as the chapter lead in North Carolina. So really vested in this field and just really passionate about the work and the progress that's been made over the last couple of years. It's been tremendous efforts that have really been going on within the last decade in this field. Just really briefly, here's my contact information. I will share that at the end of the presentation as well. I'm on Twitter, and here's my email. But once again, I will share that information at the end. So let's just do a quick overview of what our session is going to be about today. The first thing I want to do is talk to you about this issue with misinformation and polarization online. Then I want to talk to you about media literacy with youth, how youth are being impacted by this and how media literacy can be a sounding board as far as providing the skills and a space for you to basically unpack all of the things that they're seeing online and in the media, but also how to take action through civic engagement. I want to share strategies to support youth with civic engagement and some resources as well. So I will be playing some videos and introducing to you some things that I've also been involved in throughout this presentation. But first, the issue, online polarization and misinformation. And to open up this conversation, I do want to share with you all the clip from the Trust Me documentary. It's actually the trailer. I'm not sure if any of you all have ever seen this Trust Me documentary, but I got to do a plug because the Trust Me documentary is an amazing film, and it helps open up conversation around where we are in the world with media literacy and misinformation, how it's impacting us all. And you're going to see some amazing people in this trailer that have contributed to this conversation. But I want to kind of let this set the tone for today on what's happening right now with online polarization and misinformation. Trust Me documentary is where you can go to explore more. And they also have an educator guide for you to utilize in libraries if you want to do programming around the documentary.
Some programmers call it brain hacking, and the tech world would probably prefer you didn't hear about it.
The second I finish a sentence, they're on their phones. Or if they're in a group, they're on their phones.
Every time I check my phone, I'm playing the slot machine to see what did I get.
It'll be something that you're interested in because the software is studying you.
Humans are hardwired to pay attention to messages that create strong emotion.
The fake news stuff that I was doing was totally just for fun. It created outrage.
The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in your enemy's country.
The world is getting pushed and pulled apart, and yet people don't know they're being manipulated.
information has to be reliable to be considered useful.
Exposure to true information does not matter anymore.
I had failed in keeping my child safe because of misinformation, mistrust. He looked at me and he goes, "Mommy, Mommy, save me." I couldn't save him. There's nothing I could do.
Terrorism uses media to spread fear.
We've created this problem. We've also created the solution. They're just living together, and we can't tell them apart.
This is something that has never occurred in the history of the human race.
Award-winning film. If you have never seen it, I definitely encourage you. But I hope that this kind of sets the tone for you about what we're going to discuss today. So let's dive on in. I'm so used to seeing more faces. So just kind of having this situation set up where I'm talking to, without seeing everyone's faces is interesting, but okay. Let's see here. Oh, let me minimize. There we go. There we go. All right, so to set the stage, I hope that kind of really sparked your interest, but let's talk about what's going on. There's a Marvin Gaye song that my parents used to play all the time from the 70s. What's going on? What's going on in the world? So 2020 to 2021, we had so many things happen. The COVID-19 global pandemic, climate change issues. We saw Australia wildfires, the killing of George Floyd, racial unrest across the US, Donald Trump impeachment trials, Kanye running for president, infamous presidential debates, violence at the US Capitol. We saw remote schooling and state lockdowns happen. And then now the Delta variant is now at the top of the list. We're learning to accept a new normal, but in this new normal, we understand that there's constant uncertainty, even us as adults. I do want to highlight that the most epic moment of 2020 for me was Kanye running for president. So that's why I put that slide up. So why is this important? It's because with all of the chaos that's happening in the world, we're also living in a time of something called the post-truth era. And I'm not sure if you know what post-truth era means, but it basically means that we live in this time where opinions and propaganda basically reign over facts and credible information. So what that entails is there's this need for us now more than ever to understand what is information and what are the types of information. So we'll know what we're engaging with when we encounter it. So there are several different types of information. The first one is credible information, but then there's something called misinformation, which we usually hear in the buzzword fake news was circulating for so long, but it's broken down on so many levels with misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So misinformation is basically misleading content. It's not credible information, and it's information that is false. Then there's disinformation. Disinformation is information that was intentionally constructed to manipulate. Misinformation is not intentional. Disinformation is intentional. It's intended to manipulate. It's fabricated content constructed by individuals. I'm not sure if you saw in that clip, there was a fake news content creator who basically talked about how this became a way of living. There was monetary gain to create these false news stories and post them online. And then there's malinformation. Malinformation is information that is intentionally created to harm an individual or group of people. So when we think about harassment and hate speech, that's a form of malinformation. So why does all of that matter? Okay, yes, there's all these different types of information that exists, but what does that have to do with me or you, right? Or even youth for that matter that we're about to discuss? Well, there's online polarization that's happening right now in the online space, and it's impacting our lives, it's impacting government, it's impacting decisions in regards to health. And the reason that online polarization is so prevalent right now is because a lot of us as individuals are unaware of our confirmation biases. And that even includes young adults as well. Our confirmation biases are based on our beliefs, and sometimes not knowing where our beliefs come from or why we believe and feel and think the way we do. And I'm going to get to why media literacy is so important when it comes to addressing confirmation bias. There's this understanding that all media is constructed. And believe it or not, pretty much everything that we know is constructed in some kind of way. The content in which we know, what we read, what we see, those are the things that's the way we know what we know. We either have been taught it, we either have read it, or we either watched it, and we created our own beliefs of those experiences. And so a lot of our biases may be, biases that exist that we're unaware, how did we get these biases? So it's really important for us to understand where our biases come from, because as we engage in content online, we're more prone to click and like things that align with our own biases. We do it naturally, even outside of the internet or online world. Sometimes if we have an issue going on, we want to talk to that friend that's going to kind of approve of the way we think and how we think and support our beliefs in that way. It's very rare we want to go back and forth belief systems and argue. We kind of want to align ourselves with individuals that believe the things that we believe. And sometimes that can feel great for our egos, but sometimes it can limit us in finding truth and seeing truth and understanding what's really happening with ourselves and in the world. And so that's why it's important for us to be aware of our confirmation bias, because as we enter this online space, it propels, it feeds off of our biases in ways that we have no idea. And so what's happening is that as we're going in these online spaces and we're having these biases and we're seeking content that aligns with our confirmation biases, we're clicking and algorithms are starting to form about who we are, and our own algorithmic profile is online. And sometimes the internet knows more about us than we even know about our own selves, because it sees what we likes and clicks. And so it will create content and feed content based on the interests and the things that you have already clicked in your previous search history online, or in your previous posting habits online. And so it then creates what is called echo chambers, where we're now kind of stuck in information that is centered and it places us in this centered bubble of information that's one-sided. And so we need to avoid that, because that's how online polarization is created, where we now have different sides, where we're consistently seeking out individuals that believe the same things we believe and content that believes the same thing that we believe in. And then we're kind of going against each other in these online spaces. So with that being said, what about our youth? Because they're seeing our conversations. They're seeing Kanye running for president. They're seeing the murder of George Floyd on social media posts. They see and have access to these live videos. Social media is not regulated in the same regards as film and movies and TV. Social media is accessible to all to watch and view the happenings that are going on globally in our communities and nationwide, whether they are detrimental, whether they are horrific. That content, that imagery is there, and it's shaping the minds of the youth, and they need a place to unpack it. So they're watching online, they're watching on YouTube, they're watching on social media, and they're impacted emotionally. I know I myself was impacted in so many ways in regards to the national pandemic, the global pandemic when it happened last year. It was nothing like I had ever experienced before. You know, we were getting locked in. We couldn't go in nowhere. Work was getting shut down. I couldn't go to the office. I was confused. I was afraid. And so even if I was experiencing that as an adult, we know our youth have been experiencing these emotions, bottling it in, and sometimes don't know how to process it and converse about it. But they are somewhat finding outlets in many ways to express and unpack online. So getting engaged online for them is the way that they want to do that. They're seeking these opportunities to be more civically active in engaging in these conversations. But the key is, if they're not taught the skills of media literacy and they're not taught how to navigate in this online polarized environment, then they may not be equipped to maneuver it safely, and they may be contributing to some of the issues that we already have if they're unaware of it. And many of these youth, they're innocent. They have no idea to all of these things in this social media construct that has happened that they're kind of enthralled in. So I think we all came to the realization when COVID-19 happened last year that we were not prepared. We were not prepared because youth did not have, a lot of youth, especially in marginalized communities, did not have access to devices. They did not have access to the technology. But most importantly, they did not have the skills to really understand how to navigate in these online spaces with all the chaos that was happening in the world. There's been research done in 2019. Common Sense Media did research, and in one of their studies, it showed that youth do not have the skills. Majority of youth in our US do not have the skills to decipher between credible, factual information, and they cannot decipher misinformation when they're approached with it. So these youth do not have these skills. And that's why a lot of organizations right now, and even the government, is starting to see a need to invest in teaching these skills to our youth in our education systems. And just so excited that libraries are starting to be extremely invested in this work. So let's talk about it then. What is media literacy? I'm going to play a clip for you. This is another clip from the Trust Me documentary.
Just like we learn mathematics, chemistry, biology, sciences at school, we need to learn about the media.
I believed everything. Like, I literally would read something or I'd see something and I'd be like, well, they said it, so it must be true, right?
Today, we're going to talk about how we evaluate online sources. How do we figure out if we should trust these websites?
One of the first things you should do is don't even read the article. You can come back to it. Figure out if you can trust these guys. We call it lateral reading. We want to get off the page we're on and open up a new tab and read laterally. See what other sites are saying about them. Maybe check out their Wikipedia page to see, have they any controversies? See what other fact checkers or fact checking groups have written about them. In a minute, you can get a quick lesson in like, oh, should I trust these guys or not?
Because if I go to their website, is it going to tell me things about them? Sure, but it's only going to tell me their side of the story. Is that helpful for me to understand if they're trustworthy? Not really. So I actually need to research that group to know if I can trust them, to trust that minimumwage.com.
Critical media literacy gives them the skills to understand what's happening and how to read the world. There's power in that.
I think before that class, I was just not really thinking about sourcing and double fact checking and things like that. But after taking it, I realized that not everything I see is real.
I've learned to realize what makes something more reliable. You can really trust nothing until you really look it up and look for the facts.
My job as a media literacy educator is not to get my students to think the way I think. It's to get them to think. It's to get them to ask questions and to say, how do I learn to be skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical?
All right. So media literacy. The framework for media literacy is based on the ability for youth and all individuals to have these 5 skills: the skill to know how to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and take action with media. So access. Access is currently defined as how, when, where, and how often people have access to tools, technology, and digital skills necessary to thrive. The way and the framework in which I operate and work with media literacy as a practitioner scholar is I look at media literacy as this overarching umbrella. And within this overarching umbrella of media literacy, there are extensions They're extensions or subdivisions of it. And I know a lot of the work that happens in the misinformation, disinformation kind of arena falls more so under the news literacy aspect, with teaching these skills of analyzing and evaluating. But then there's this digital literacy aspect of having access to technology, knowing how to use the technology, how to turn it on, how to send an email, just knowing how to manage and maneuver in the functions and operations of digital technology. And so in the framework in which I work as a practitioner scholar, I like to look at that access category specifically within that digital literacy arena. Who has access? Who doesn't have access? What are those skills? Because when we really talk about media literacy, it really isn't a binary approach, like you have it or you don't. It's really a spectrum when you really look at it. And the spectrum has a lot to do with this accessibility. Because if you don't have accessibility, you might not know how to turn on a device. You might not know how to use a device. And therefore, you don't even know how to even get into some of these online spaces to even be able to function on a higher level of media literacy with understanding how to look at digital content and to assess it and evaluate it. And so this accessibility component is the first and major skill of media literacy, because in order for media literacy to even really transpire and to have those skill sets, you have to have access to the media, right? So analyze is the second component of media literacy. It's the second skill, and that is the ability to basically assess and look at content in the process of asking questions about a piece of media in order to identify authorship, credibility, purpose, context. So earlier, I was speaking about how it's important for us to analyze our beliefs and our confirmation biases. And that's because there's this social constructivist lens associated with media literacy education. And what this social constructivist lens means is that it's understanding that all content and all representations, imagery, language, words, all of these things are constructed. And the individual who constructs actually has the power to dictate the messaging and the representations. And so understanding that all media is constructed by an individual, you then understand that there's this need to analyze, who is this person that made this? What are their belief system and how is it playing out in this media? But most importantly, what are the viewpoints that's included? Whose viewpoints are missing out? Who's not involved in this conversation? And how is the representations in this construct or in this piece of media? How does it influence other groups and other people as they interact and see it? What are the political aspects of this piece? And what is the purpose behind this piece? How are they targeting me? And so these are the aspects of the analytical processes associated with media literacy. This is essential when we really talk about news literacy or misinformation and disinformation, because these are questions. There's a question asking aspect associated with having to understand what is true, what is factual. You first got to ask yourself, is this true? So that question asking process is right here in the analytical phase. Then there's the evaluative phase of media literacy, which is a skill that allows us to draw on one's meanings, judgments, and make conclusions about media messages based on the information gathered. Is this just? Is this harmful? Is this detrimental? I looked at this advertisement. Is this harmful towards a specific group? How do I see myself in alignment with this advertisement? How does this advertisement or this piece of media or information represent me and my culture? So that's where the evaluative aspects, after you know what you know about the content, that we start to look at it in context of me, we, and all of us. How are we impacted? How are we impacted by people, as a group, as a culture, as humanity? And then we go to the creation aspect. This is a skill in which many of us, we kind of look at it as, you know what, these youth today, they're digital natives, so they got it, right? And truth be told, they may be a digital savvy in many areas that we're not. I know I just learned about Discord, the online space of Discord through youth, and a lot of the media, the new media that comes about, like TikTok, I learned through youth. But in regards to them being digital natives, that doesn't necessarily mean that they completely embody the skills to understand how to create positive and critical media creations. And you cannot overestimate and think that just because they have a cell phone, that means that they're digital savvy. Because I recently did a research study with another doctoral student and professor where we coined this term called digitally foreign learners. And what that term means is there are a lot of students that know TikTok, but they don't know anything about Google Docs. They can't maneuver in this space and understanding how to construct the email. Granted, they may know how to post emojis and get on their social media apps, but then there's this level of communication and knowing how to appropriately communicate in ways in different spaces that you may communicate one way in text, but then you can't communicate in those ways on learning management systems and in your academic spaces. And how does that maneuver? But beyond that, also being able to make connections with video and sound and imagery and align them when you're doing video construction and things of that nature. So there's so much more to digital natives being creators than just being able to use their phone. We have to explore that further, and we have to create spaces for that. We have to teach them how to do that in meaningful ways. They have the power. We have to teach them and guide them how to use it in meaningful ways. Act, and that's the way we do it. Taking action is to engage civically as the result of thoughtful access, analysis, and evaluation of media messages we receive to spark. Once you engage with media literacy, you'll see after you went through the analyzing and the evaluative stages that there's something to do. And that's where civic engagement is and how it ties in hand with media literacy. Because through media literacy, it's going to call for action. And so we want to equip youth with the skills that they need to act and act effectively in these spaces that they already are very heavily participating in. So what are some strategies to support youth civic engagement? I want to show you this interview that I actually just had the opportunity to do with the Washington Post and another psychology researcher, Nadia Brazier. It's some great strategies that are in this video, but then I'm going to kind of spell out some more strategies as well. We're living today in what is considered a post-truth era. That means we're living during times where subjectivity reigns over objectivity. Any information that we receive in this post-truth era, it goes hand in hand with understanding that what we see impacts our beliefs and then impacts our actions.
In this episode, we're tackling misinformation, why it's so common, how to identify it, and what to do when you come across it. I'm Nicole Ellis. This is the new normal.
Misinformation refers to content that's false, but that wasn't necessarily created with the intention of harming a group of people or a country or an organization.
We are constantly looking around for cues that things are true and false in situations where we're unsure, right? And we tend to hear things that are true more times than things that are false. So repeated information feels truer than new information. You can imagine when fake news is being shared repeatedly, that becomes a problem.
There was a study that was done by Common Sense Media in 2019 that actually showed that the majority of students in our nation lack the skills to decipher between factual and uncredible information. That can be fixed through education and skill building.
I feel like the challenge and really the bigger issue that we're all trying to navigate is how to build those media literacy skills.
The first tip is to ask yourself, what type of information am I engaging with? Is this information credible? It also helps you understand as a viewer and consumer that all media is created by an individual. So that individual's perspectives, backgrounds, and biases may have the ability to impact the messaging, the content, the imagery of what is presented. The second step is to check your own biases. You have to ask yourself certain questions like, where did I get this concept or this idea or this belief system? Where did it come from? Is it something that I read? Was it something that was taught to me? Is it based off of my religious beliefs? When you understand how your beliefs have framed your approach or the lens in which you see the world, you will then understand how that lens can either be foggy or clear when you engage with media or news. We have to take an open-minded approach when we engage with information, because otherwise we may shut out the opportunity to find truth.
What we don't want is a situation where people are skeptical to the point where they're not accepting credible information.
Research has actually shown that individuals that engage in active, open-minded thinking, they are less likely to experience strong, polarized beliefs online when they are approached with misinformation.
But even if you're going in with an open mind, how do you make sure that what you're looking at is credible?
So there's different ways you can do that, either by fact checking, but then there's also this skill called lateral reading. Lateral reading is when you take different windows in your screen or on your phone and you look at the different sources and the different articles about that topic and what is being said, to look at it from different perspectives and find that kernel of truth.
You know, as journalists, it's our jobs to be looking at multiple sources, but for everyday people, they just may not have the time. So I'm curious to hear, what's the next best option?
Focusing on things like whether the site is credible and follows standard journalistic practices. You'd be surprised, 59% of links on Twitter aren't even clicked on before they're shared. And so those are missed opportunities to notice that a website is really shoddy and shady looking. Often these fake news sites, if you actually went to the site, it would be really obvious that this is not a credible news source.
If you see someone that has actually posted misinformation online, send them a DM and let them know that, hey, that information is actually misinformation, and provide a link. Do not blast anyone online in front of people, but educate others.
Misinformation has so many dire consequences, from the reemergence of diseases that were thought to be eradicated, to harming the environment, literal violence, political violence. So to the extent that we can each play our part and be more mindful of what we're liking and sharing, we should do that.
We're gonna keep covering topics like this, so stay tuned. For more stories like this one, find us at thelily.com and washingtonpost.com.
We're living today in what... All right, so I'm gonna break down some of these strategies, a lot more to be kind of tangible strategies that you can utilize in your libraries. The first and number one strategy that I would pose to you all as librarians and stakeholders that work in the community with youth and provide programming and services is to use and provide resources. There are so many resources that are available already out here that have been created. You do not have to start from scratch. I know that there was a poll that the National Association of Media Literacy Education did a couple of years back, where they were asking educators that do media literacy, how do you find your resources? What do you use? And the majority of the educators were saying they were creating their own. And there's been so much work in this field over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, that unless you are compelled to want to start from scratch, you can, or if you can't find anything. But I guarantee you there's so much out there. And with that being said, I want to share with you this initiative. I'm currently serving as the project manager for this work, the Cyber Citizenship Initiative. It is with the National Association of Media Literacy Education, New America, Cyber Florida, and Operation K-12. This initiative is pretty much kind of housed under Cyber Florida. They are the main funders. If you're not aware, Florida is one of the most progressive states in doing media literacy. There's funding centered around providing teacher training for media literacy. And there's also standards laid out in Florida for media literacy to be implemented in schools instruction. And so they are very invested in media literacy education. But this cyber citizenship initiative is a partnership on a national level with several allied organizations involved, including ISTE, which is the International Society for Technology and Education. And so a lot of large partners like that are involved, and RAND as well, who has done a lot of work in their Truth Decay initiative in creating standards as well. These resources have been vetted, these resources have been curated. And so in this, on this hub, it's located on OER. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what OER is, but it is it's Open Educational Resources, a site for that, where resources that are free and available. So you don't have to pay for these resources. And you can do work, lessons, activities with youth that teach misinformation and disinformation. Here's an example of a resource that is currently in the OER Commons. If many of you all are not familiar, Civic Online Reasoning is an initiative out of SHEG, the Stanford History Education Group, where these scholars have done so much work, especially in the field of social studies, on history and the need for media literacy skills in social studies. And so a lot of the modules, they have videos, they have quizzes, they have activity lesson plans that can be implemented that teach the skills of fact checking and how to dissect misinformation. But one of the key skills that came out of this initiative, the Civic Online Reasoning, is this skill called lateral reading. And that skill was mentioned earlier in one of the prior videos about media literacy education. And so lateral reading is one of those skills. Fact checking is another one of those skills to kind of help maneuver in this misinformation climate. Fact checking is verifying resources. Lateral reading is when you actually open up different windows and you read an article, because most of the time when we read content online, we usually open up a web page and we're very linear in how we read that content. But what lateral reading does, it says, don't just read that article down. It says, okay, read this. And who is this that they're mentioning? Let's open up a window and look at that. And who is the creator of this? Okay, let's open up a window and look at that. And what is being said in this article right here? Okay, let's look that up in another window and look at that. So we can kind of look across and see what is being said. What are the different perspectives and where's the kernel of truth? So there's that lateral reading skill that Civic Online Reasoning does a lot with teaching that skill set. And of course, there's fact checking skills as well, and websites that you can utilize to look up if something's factual or credible. I do want to highlight, because I have librarians on this call, that this New America National Initiative, we do have an educator focus group. We have about 100 resources right now in the OER Hub, but we're working on an even bigger extension of this hub, which is going to be a larger website that will house more resources. It will be actually paid resources and free resources, because we saw that there's a need to still allow people to know that these resources exist, and then they can make the decision whether or not they want to invest. But we want to have this space where all of these resources are located. And so in the process of doing this hub that I just shared with you, and also sharing as we're building this new site that is an extension of the hub, we have educator focus groups monthly. And if you're interested in the educator focus groups, please email me. My email is jander44@uncc.edu. I'm going to share it again at the end of this slide. But please email me because if you're interested in coming, our educator focus groups are held the last Tuesday of each month from 4:30 to 6, and you will be on a call with other educators, other librarians. We have one of the leads from Future Ready Librarians that is an active member of this educator focus group community, and discussing the resources that are being pooled, helping to find more resources to go in this hub, and evaluating ways in which we can make this space, this resource and tool more efficient and effective for educators to use. So if you're interested, please let me know. And then you meet a lot of other individuals doing this work in the field, especially in the K-12 young adult space. Second strategy, center youth interest. It should be about the youth if you're working with the youth. What are they into? What do they like? Who is the hottest TikToker out there right now? I know my daughter, she's a fan of Addison Rae. She's a preteen. We just got through watching Addison Rae's new movie. He's all that. But young people, they're entertainers, and the people they look up to are now these TikToker social media influencers, and also in YouTubers. Sniper Wolf. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sniper Wolf. Sniper Wolf is everything in this house. And so just knowing what the teens are into, where they're at, and what media that they're actively using, because that media can be the platform in which they're using to learn how to dissect and how to create in those spaces. So with Centering Youth, I did want to share some amazing texts that I think that would be great. And I had planned before to have some of my books out because I wanted to show you some. I have all these books except this last one. I'm gonna tell you why. Not Light But Fire. If you are having conversations about politics and race that may come up, and you want to kind of have a nonpartisan kind of space, but you want it to be a space where you can center the youth's interest on these issues, because you want to talk about the things that they're passionate about. You want to create these spaces. This is an excellent guide. Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom. I read this book in my doctoral program. It is a very strategic kind of step-by-step guide that's very practical. But what I love about it is how the author, without saying it in this text, utilizes media literacy. He pulls a lot of content from TV shows and film and shows those media clips to spark dialogue and to allow the kids to take the floor and share their experience or how they feel. And so this is a great text. Teaching Media Literacy by Belina Debreu. She's an amazing educator in this media literacy space. She's the president over the International Media Literacy Council. She's done so much work with youth media literacy as a researcher and practitioner in the field. I would definitely encourage you to get that book. It was published by ALA in 2019. This is Renee Hobbs' most recent book, Media Literacy in Action. I just got the book and I was flipping through it like a week ago and I was like, oh, this is good. So I'm gonna share that. If you didn't know, this is a great text, and there's also practical guides in implementing media literacy to spark civic engagement and center youth. And then I had to highlight this upcoming book because this is a text that I'm so excited about. It's my first book, and it's with YALSA President Kelly Zarnicki. She's the current YALSA president. And it's Power Lines, Connecting with Teens in Urban Communities Through Media Literacy. Our book is coming out this spring. It's already in the ALA store for pre-order. We have literally reached out to librarians, teen librarians across the US. They've put program profiles of them doing media literacy in case studies, how effective it's been, the challenges, the successes at different library systems, also profiles with universities and community organizations that have worked with the libraries to implement media literacy. But that's one half of the book, and the other half is the how-to steps. Like, how do you reach urban youth? Who are urban youth? Is that just kind of coded words, or is there such thing? Like, and what are the challenges that are facing these communities? And how do we really get them engaged? And how do we teach media literacy, incorporate the things and challenges that they're experiencing in this work? And so that book is coming out in spring of 2022. Lastly, this is my last tip: create a dialogic space. So when we talk about creating a dialogic space, we're talking about, if you're going to do media literacy that involves civic engagement. I was just on a call discussing political literacy with the Parliament members of the UK, and they use this term civic engagement and political literacy kind of interchangeably, but it deals with the issues that impact us as people in the world. And how can you talk about those issues without making sure that you have set up kind of a safe space where people feel confident, where they feel that they can express their thoughts and feelings, where we can agree to that we will disagree on some of our belief systems, and it's okay. But how do we create this space to engage in that dialogue with media literacy? Because a large part of media literacy is dialogue. Me as a media literacy educator right now, I'm talking way more than I would ever talk when doing a media literacy workshop with you, because I just kind of serve as a facilitator for asking questions, and I allow the youth to lead that dialogue. And so you want to allow them to discuss those pressing issues, explore the biases that they have. We want to challenge them. And it's okay to create a space where those biases are challenged, as long as it's done in a very respectful and safe way. And to engage them in active, open-minded thinking. That's the piece right there. That's gonna be the main the main reason that they're able to engage in dialogue safely is because we have to encourage and teach active, open-minded thinking strategies to youth. There's been research that has been shown that active, open-minded thinking is actually a beneficial skill to building resilience with facing misinformation and also acquiring polarized belief systems, especially politically. So active, open-minded thinking is very key. Oh, I thought that was the last one. This is the last one. Provide an opportunity for them to create and act. So after you create that space, you have those conversations. We got to create a space for them to create and act. And I'm going to leave out and close out on this presentation by showing an example of that. So this past year, I started this project called the Black Girls Film Camp, where I wanted to create a safe space for Black girls to be their authentic selves, to speak our Ave African-American vernacular English in a safe way where we're not judged as ratchet or uneducated, but being able to just be our authentic selves and to share our stories and to create content. So this is one of the creations that came about, and this is a civically engaged social justice piece that I want to show you that one of the teams created.
Hi, my name is Jessica Johnson. I'm 16 years old, and what I have learned most from the Black Girls Film Camp is that it definitely takes a village to raise a film. There's so many stories that deserve to be told, and it's up to us, young Black women, to build a strong and united team to help cultivate these stories. My film is titled Colorblind, and it's about two best friends brought together by the innocence of childhood and divided by the truth and affliction of life. I hope you enjoy my film.
Innocence. Innocence blinded by the detrimental fact that we will grow with two completely different perspectives of the world. Innocence blinded by the two different worlds we live in, come from. Innocence blinded by me.
Tonight's news at 6, Trayvon Benjamin Martin, an African-American 17-year-old high school student, was shot by a white Community Watch officer in Florida. George Zimmerman, a Sanford, Florida Community Watch captain, called 911 saying that he wanted to approach someone, but Zimmerman was told to not leave his SUV. Zimmerman admits he shot Martin and claims of self-defense. More on this disturbing story of Trayvon Martin's death at 6. Today, we bring you breaking news unfolding in Minneapolis, Minnesota, after a 911 call comes in from a convenience store informing police that George Floyd had purchased cigarettes using a counterfeit $20 bill. 17 minutes after the first patrol car arrives, Minneapolis police arrest 46-year-old George Floyd. After Officer Derek Chauvin with badge number 1087 showed up, he took it upon himself to kneel down on the neck of George Floyd. This disturbing image was captured by 17-year-old Darnella Frazier. So far, experts say that
stuff like this happens all the time.
No, it doesn't. It's a man being murdered. You're worried about some outfit that doesn't even matter.
It has nothing to do with me. Why should I care?
That's the problem.
My friend once told me she was colorblind, but if you don't see color, you'll see the pattern. 500 years seems like a while ago, but yet I still hear the cry of my ancestors every day. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
begging repeatedly for air. The officers involved in George Floyd's death have yet to be charged and convicted of the crime involving Mr. Floyd. Later tonight at 6, more on the tragic event of George Floyd's death.
They don't see who we are. They only see our color. That could be my dad with a police officer's knee in his neck.
James Baldwin once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." My friend once told me she was colorblind. Maybe she's just blind.
All right, so that is the end of my presentation. I am definitely open to answering any questions on how to engage youth civically with media and media literacy. Thank you, Breck. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you so much, Georgia. Awesome. I'm glad you all got something out of it. Great. Are there any questions? Yes. So, Anne, you said, will you please expand on the digital informed learner? And what I'm actually going to do, Anne, is I'm going to also share the article with you for the digitally foreign learners as well. But basically, this concept is about understanding that when we look at ability versus motivation, which we saw during this phase of COVID, and we had to go to the shift to remote learning, there are some youth that were not engaging in the learning space academically. And I think that online academically. And I think that when we think about youth being able to have access to devices such as cell phones, and we think that it will translate across all areas, and that's not the case. So with this concept basically helps us understand is that more affluent youth are accustomed to engaging in technology and digital online platforms in academic and informative ways that youth that do not come from typically from affluent backgrounds, but especially economically disadvantaged youth and youth in rural communities that are not used to accessing technology and utilizing it for homework and having someone in the household to help guide them and help them understand how to navigate and utilize media in academic and informative ways. Those youth are not accustomed to being academic learners in the digital environment. So those youth are actually considered digitally foreign learners. These are learners that typically do not have access to computers. They may only have a cell phone device, and that's their only way to link to the internet. They do not have access to computers, and maybe they struggle to have strong broadband service. But beyond that, also, they do not have support structures behind them that are teaching them how to learn in the digital environment. They're either in schools or receiving instruction with educators that are not utilizing technology in their instruction, or they are in a home environment where maybe someone doesn't even know how to use technology in that aspect to guide them and teach them. And so, of course, there's this, once again, another equity gap that is created that just handing out devices can't fix, because there's still going to be a gap with, even if you have technology instruction in class, if you're not getting it at home. So you become a foreign learner in this space. I hope that I hope that may be helpful in explaining that more. I'm going to provide the link to that article in the chat right now.
Thank you so much, Jamika. Jamika, I'm Linda with Minitex. I just got a chat from Beth that her Zoom is frozen, or she would have popped on. So
no worry.
So thank you so much for this awesome presentation. So many valuable resources. We just have about a minute left. Are there any